and for staking on listings. So basically, when you're a seller, you're going to deposit some number of origin tokens just as a stake. Then, I need to brush up a little bit on that, but yeah.
How about iCash? What's kind of your guys' token design?
Our token is also for staking. So what iCash wants to do is create a secure and private way to vote so that data incoming to smart contract is as close to 100% honest as possible. So the staking mechanism is in place to create a mapping between real value and the premium that a party wants to pay to ensure that their smart contract will settle correctly to the terms described.
And Andrey, you've worked with over 100 projects. So we talked about this a little backstage. So what do you advise projects on how to, best practices with design, what to avoid when they're designing their tokens?
Well, if we are talking about utility tokens, it's a one story. And actually, designing utility tokens, it's a lot like game design. First, you craft a story. Second, you craft a set of incentive. Then you verify the business model, and then you do packaging. And the biggest problem with utility tokens, especially for fundraising, that, well, we have a pure conflict of interest between investors and real users. Investors want speculative, highly deflationary token. Users want a stable one. So if you use your utility token to raise money, forget about utility function after the ICO. Because the utility value of token will be much less than speculative value of the token. None of you users would really try to use your token for the utility purposes. You will kill your project by yourself. And second thing you need to think about, if your token is utility, you're actually selling your future revenue. So if you sold 80% of your future tokens and you will keep your promises, you already sold 80% of your company to investors. What you keep for yourself?
You guys have any comments on that?
I think most token models are an exercise in brainstorming. I think the best companies use proven models, and I would echo with your points on it's very hard to find true utility. iCash is a security token. But back to the topic of economics, when tokens are used to create, just to be used as like a payment means, there's nothing supporting, uniqueness about it. There's no way the token will hold its value, and thus, that would require the need for a stablecoin. But I think the actual way to think about this problem is saying, what problem what inefficiencies in the ecosystem do you want to solve, or at least buffer? I think the best models for tokens are actually exchange tokens, because exchanges, even though they get a bad rap for being very dominant in the space of blockchain and cryptocurrency, they serve a very important function, and that's to make it easier to transfer value to and from different parties. And the way the exchange tokens work is that they incentivize the users to spend money.
How would it incentivize user?
They incentivize the users to spend money because they reduce the cost.
Well, if the token can keep the value, imagine we have first time in history we have a tool to keep value forever. It's an ideal investment tool and it's an ideal investment vehicle. Why would I spend tokens that can keep value for the utility purposes? Because digital money and digital tokens, they don't have wear and tear effect. Gold money, paper money has this effect. So even if they theoretically can keep value, practically they can keep value for long. Tokens and digital money can. So we actually stable tokens and tokens that can keep value forever, they create absolutely opposite incentive to keep, not to spend.
Anybody want to?
I'm not fully defending exchange tokens, I'm just using them as an example, but to answer your point, there's more than one use case for exchange tokens. They have a buyback program, and it's also used in voting. So the voting makes sense because there will be large entities that want to sway in favor which new coin that they most likely invested in gets listed on exchange. So Huobi token is a good one that uses this model, and it creates some sort of underpinning of value to buffer the risk with liquidity.
Are there good, what's like a project that you think has really good token design?
Just to repeat myself, I do like Huobi. I like the fact that they use tokens not just for keeping the value, but also to measure what's the inherent value of my vote. iCash has a similar model. It doesn't use a collection of tokens for voting. It uses the tokens in the day-to-day automated voting process as a way to encourage users to vote.
A token that has good design, Ethereum, ETH. As far as the others, I'm not sure that anything has really been proven yet.
Do you want to, Andrey?
CryptoKitties. Great example of the token design. Right set of incentive, great story. Backed by a real idea, and people love this idea. True collectibles. Perfect.
What are some things that you tell people to watch out for when you're advising them on designing their tokens? Some common mistakes, like things that most people just get wrong.
For me, one thing I always try to look out for is making sure that you're not just creating a token for the sake of creating a token. So you want to make sure it has intrinsic value in the system. That's actually really hard. There's an argument to be made for, like, say, creating a token to compensate the initial people that create a platform or whatever. And that is kind of more of the origin approach right now. But yeah, I think the strongest type of token that you can have is it performs some role that could not be filled by an existing token. So you say, well, can this be done by any other ERC20 token, or can this be done by ETH? Then maybe you don't really need to be creating a token.
We have, the way we see it is we want our token to map to the domain of the problem that it solves. If we go back to Ethereum, the protocol token, or the native currency as they would say, that represents the demand for highly available distributed computing on the blockchain. So prior to Ethereum, that has not existed, and it's very unlikely that there's going to be a need for such a thing. But there does always seem to be a need for slight variance, because there's no such thing as a perfect solution. So there's a lot of projects that are also doing distributed blockchain immutable storage computing, and they will have their demand too. At iCash, we see the problem that we're solving as what's necessary for smart contracts to evolve in complexity. So right now, in Ethereum, the only smart contracts that can be made are contracts that act as a simple ledger. This is how much you invested, this is your tranche, this is your pre-sale bonus, and this is when your vesting period goes up. That's really easy to do in the synchronous database model that Ethereum has. But if you want to start writing real contracts that closely resemble the financial needs in the Web 2.0 world, I'm talking about financial options, futures, escrows, different types of escrows, like for real estate, etc. All of those require a trusted third party, and right now that does not exist. And we see our token as evolving into a protocol that creates its own system, its own distributed ledger to create that trust network?
Well, if you want to create a token like coin, first you are not creating coin, you are creating a monetary policy. Second, because your token is not baked by anything by the idea, you need to spread not your token but your idea. If people will buy your idea, they will buy your token and will start using it. Third, you need to think about the set of incentive you plant into your token. What would you like people really to do? Not like on a paper, or what feature of the design of the token would motivate people to do some stuff. If you want people to keep your token, you need to implement one set of features. If you want people to spend your token, you want to implement a different set of features. So it's all about designing the policy and less about designing the token.
Would you advise projects to have multiple tokens, like one for utility, one for security, or otherwise?
Token is an idea. If your product have multiple ideas, you can have multiple tokens for different purposes. And it's not a good way to mess up idea in a mix.
Absolutely. I think a really good example is for stablecoins in the way some good stablecoin companies are creating creating a dual token model. There's also smart contract blockchains that don't use mining, like Neo. They have a dual token model. One's for the native currency to send, and the other one's for how much ownership you have in the network.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why you can't have multiple tokens if they're each serving some unique purpose. It really just depends on the project.
So on the regulatory side, if you were the commissioner of the SEC, right, how would you look at the space? How would you define what is a utility token, what is a security token, and what would you say in terms of policy regulation? Like if you had a magic wand to really benefit this industry.
Well, it's very hard to say because any object has two sides. One of the side of the utility, one of the side of the security. Because even like ordinary object like cars or stamps can be used for the generating profit if you can manage to create a deficit. So from my perspective, we need, if something was offered to the investors, it's a security by definition. Because investors only buy stuff that can grow in value and can bring profit. And at the same time, people can try to create pure utility tokens like access keys or like discounts, coupons. Some people even can try to create coins like ideas, and it might work like it works in game currencies. The question is if you would cheat yourself and use for the regulators, for me, one of the red flags is using the course from the exchange to define the value of the token. If you create a closed loop ecosystem with your own token, why wouldn't you use it like a Starbucks miles or airline miles or Starbucks points? Use your internal course, like in games, and no problem at all. But if you okay to give people speculate with your token, and if you're okay to use this course, be prepared.
What do you guys think? How would you define these tokens and how would you regulate them?
I mean, I don't know. It seems very kind of subjective and very confusing. I don't know that I'm necessarily convinced that there's a really good, effective regulation strategy. You know, maybe I would ask what the purpose of the regulations are, and maybe look for simpler ways to solve some of these problems without having to categorize all the tokens and everything.
This is a really complicated subject. When I encounter something like this, my rules of thumb is saying, does this work fully? Is this a working product and it solves the problem by itself, this token? And in 99% of all cases, that's a resounding no. And there are plenty, it's fine. Like, a lot of companies are solving some problems and the token is doing something, but the law is pretty clear that says if you're raising money and it's incomplete, that's actually security. So I've always been the one to do things properly. In terms of design, how what's the best way, really dependent on the business use case and learning and growing fast feedback after you built the product.
So for iCash, it's a security token. How did you guys decide to do that? And what is the security backed by? How should I calculate the value of my iCash tokens?
So the connections that we have a stronger background in law. Our executive vice president, John Malbo, holds a JD and MBA from Harvard. We have advisors that work in the patent office. We have over 70 patents describing peer-to-peer wagering using our protocol. So it's simply we got access to the right information at the right time, and we're glad we've taken the thoughtful approach. In terms of understanding the market cap, we take three representative markets that we want to tackle. So that's traditional financial derivatives, that's options, futures. That's an industry with 20 trillion in annual volume. You can look up the stats on the Chicago Board of Exchange. You can even look at BitMEX, which does crypto derivatives. They do billions in XBTC volume a day. The other markets, real estate, escrows, and supply chain insurance, those industries all have very large total market cap, and we look at what is possible with existing technology today with Ethereum. Like we don't know if Dfinity or Algorand will come out with extremely high throughput, extremely scalable high throughput blockchain. If it does, we'd be very glad to build on them. We're looking at a variety of blockchains, but the truth of the matter is this technology is still young, and right now we're limited to building on Ethereum and soon EOS. And based on that, we know that maybe a 3 to 5% subset of that market value can be captured.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
What kind of exemption do you use to create a token? A, B?
We are a Regulation D.
Regulation D, okay. Then how would your users use your token if your token will be locked for a year? And how would the non-accredited investor get access to a token?
We are targeting many exchanges in Asia. This regulation is largely with complying with U.S. laws.
So you are not, your project wouldn't operate in the US?
Our project will be, the operators of our network will largely be data centers all over the world. We see ourselves as a global solution in blockchain. And we do want eventual US involvement, but we are playing to the best strategy we have.
Well, then why, okay, if your token can't operate in the US, why would you register it as a security? Because, under the EU regulation, your token is utility.
Because it's quite obvious how, even though you're not an iCash maintainer of the network, you can still directly benefit from iCash. You can benefit from having your portfolio devs all use the protocol to create more advanced functionality for trading, for scalability, for KYC without exposing the identifying information.
So we are talking about accredited investors.
Sorry?
We are talking about accredited investors in the US. These people who would benefit from these features.
Wait,
I don't
can you ask
understand.
your question again? I'm enjoying this, but
this value you just explained people would get by having your token. These people, according to the law, has to be accredited investors.
So private investors, even if they're based in the US, are subject to a 1-year lockup
Yes, of course.
Yes, of their tokens after we have as an investor, this is our opinion, but we don't want to deal with investors that plan on using the token. It would be great if they spent the token by programming on our blockchain, but we don't expect investors to have both skills.
So for them, it is a speculative tool. It has no utility for them.
The utility is the ability to, if you're investing in the US, is the ability to invest in something that's necessary for the blockchain ecosystem. And if you're outside the US and you want to become a builder on this protocol, the utility is being part of that process early.
Okay, thank you.
So, Tyler, let's pick on you. As a utility token on Origin, how should someone think about the value of it? Like, if I'm buying your token, or if I want to hold your token, like, what's the value of it?
I wouldn't speculate on that. I would just say, yeah, if you have use for it on the Origin platform, then great. You should use it to go buy something. To go back to what you asked earlier, it's used as also used as a commission to pay basically the marketplaces. So if I'm a seller, I'm creating a listing, I would attach some sort of commission that maybe could boost the listing on these marketplace apps, and then if a marketplace manages to find a buyer for it, the marketplace keeps the commission. The buyer, of course, and the seller, they interact, so it's kind of an incentive for these marketplaces to facilitate the transaction. So, yeah, I would just say I would just recommend using it. Wouldn't make any speculations about the value.
So in essence, it's, even though it has to deal with marketplaces and real world assets, it's still a token that facilitates greater liquidity in these sort of exchanges.
Yeah, I mean, what do you mean by that?
So one example I just thought of after what you just said was imagining how previously in the system you could use Airbnb credits, Uber credits, etc., just as a pegged currency. But if there were bonuses or rewards that token holders are able to receive, or massive discounts they could just buy, in terms of the reduction of the commission. A low commission is what keeps big e-commerce stores profitable. And if you are able to create a system to take that commission number and drive it down even further, that could lead to a more efficient marketplace. And having the token model built in where it accounts for that loss and some other benefit would be a solution that benefits ultimately the end users.
Okay, that's interesting.
So, well, if the token is act like Starbucks points or airline miles, company actually sharing revenue to support the value of the token. So it's easy to calculate. If this token is not backed by anything and it's openly tradable token, well, the value of the token is the value of the belief. It's a religion. When you create a token, you create a religion. If there a lot of people believe into it, it has value. If nobody believes, it has no value. And if you would like to think about it, it's good to think about the value of the token as a reputation of a person. And the reputation of a person can be intrinsic, or it can be borrowed. And the same case with tokens. Token can create a reputation over time, like Bitcoin, or it can borrow reputation from the team and from the project. Like most of the tokens that were created during, recently and during the ICOs. And token itself has no value. It's value of the team and value of the project that really fuels this token, at least initially. Of course, token can develop intrinsic reputation, intrinsic value, but it wouldn't happen overnight.
Now we're talking about religion. This is good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some interesting comparisons. It is, yeah, I mean, obviously any sort of, currency is just ultimately based on the collective belief that people have in that thing. But I would distinguish it from reputation, because I mean, tokens themselves can't really take actions, right? It's really more like a coordination game where everyone benefits when they do use the same currency as everyone else, or at least a large number of people. So it's not, reputation is more like, if you keep your word over time and you are trying to be honest, then you gain a good reputation. But tokens can't really take actions. So it's an interesting comparison, but I think at the end of the day, it's like, with there being so many tokens now, it really is going to come down to kind of, part of it is marketing and getting people to believe, but part of it is also like, what can you actually do with it? And at the end of the day, I think people want to probably deal with as few tokens as possible.
I hold a different perspective. So I'm aware of there's a lot of advancement in decentralized exchanges, and of course there's actually merits to a single currency model as well. But in my view, there will be a future where decentralized exchanges will be as prevalent as being able to sign in via Facebook. So I think in the future there's going to be an abstraction where if you want to make a transaction from business A to business B, or facilitate one, or it could even be centralized. There's some very low commission protocol to exchange those currencies instantly. The reason why that works is because when you reach a state where volume is high enough, you can simply have enough market makers, so to speak, on this decentralized exchange to create that transaction system, not for the benefit of the exchange, but for the benefit of the users.